The small town of Willow Creek had always been quiet, too quiet. Life moved at a slow, comfortable pace until the disappearances started. One by one, people were vanishing without a trace. It began with a few strangers, but soon it was people everyone knew. A teacher, a store clerk, a young mother. The media called it the work of the collector, but no one knew who he was or how he chose his victims. Only that once someone disappeared, they were never found again. Emma, a 25-year-old waitress, didn't let the rumors get to her. She lived in a quiet part of town and worked the late shift at a diner just a few blocks from her apartment. Still, the recent disappearances left a heavy weight in the air, a constant reminder that danger could be lurking around any corner. It was a typical late night at work. The diner was nearly empty, and the neon sign outside flickered against the darkness. As her shift ended, Emma stepped outside, the cool air biting at her skin. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself and started the familiar walk home, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. Her phone buzzed, a text from her roommate. "You heading home?" Emma quickly replied, "Just leaving the diner." As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, she noticed a white van parked along the curb a few blocks ahead. She had seen it before, parked in different parts of town, always just out of place. She didn't think much of it at first, but tonight something about the van felt different. It seemed to be idling, as if waiting for something, or someone. Emma's pace quickened, her heart beginning to race. The van didn't move, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced behind her. No one. The street was empty, but when she turned back, the van had crept forward. Panic surged in her chest. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she tried to dial 911. But before she could press call, the van's side door slid open, and a figure leapt out, grabbing her from behind. Emma struggled, her scream muffled by a gloved hand as she was yanked off the sidewalk and shoved into the back of the van. The door slammed shut. The world outside vanished. When Emma came to, she was bound to a wooden chair, her wrists and ankles tightly tied. The room was small, dimly lit, with concrete walls and no windows. The air was cold and damp like a basement. She blinked, trying to clear her foggy mind, and noticed a man standing in the corner, his face hidden in shadow. He wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face. "You're awake," he said, his voice calm, too calm. Emma's heart pounded as she looked around, searching for an escape. Her gaze fell on a table in the corner of the room. It was covered in small items, watches, rings, necklaces, personal belongings that looked like they had been taken from someone, or from many people. "These are my trophies," the man said, stepping forward. His face was still hidden, but his presence was overpowering. "Each one belonged to someone who's been here. Someone like you." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She realized with a sickening dread that these items belonged to his victims, all those people who had vanished. This is where they ended up. "I've been watching you for a while," the man continued. "You're a perfect addition." Emma's mind raced. She had to get out of here. She tugged at the ropes, but they held tight. The man turned and left the room, locking the door behind him. Hours passed, or was it days? Emma couldn't tell. Her wrists were raw from pulling at the ropes. She knew she couldn't stay here. She had to try something. As she twisted her wrists again, she felt something sharp under her chair, a nail sticking out from the wood. Desperately, she started rubbing the rope against it, sawing at the binds. The fibers began to fray. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside the door. The man was coming back. Emma's heart raced as the ropes loosened. The door creaked open, and the man stepped inside. This was her chance. She freed her wrists just as he approached. With all her strength, she lunged, knocking him off balance. The man stumbled back, hitting the floor with a grunt. Emma bolted for the door, tearing down the dim hallway, her breath coming in panicked gasps. She didn't know where she was, but she knew she had to run. She burst through a back door and found herself in the middle of dense woods. Darkness surrounded her, but there was no time to stop. She ran. Branches whipped her face and her legs burned with exhaustion, but she didn't stop. The man's footsteps were close behind, his breath heavy, getting closer. In the distance, she saw the faint glimmer of headlights. A car. She pushed herself harder, waving her arms, screaming for help as the car slowed down. But just as she reached the edge of the road, the van pulled up in front of her, blocking her path. The side door slid open,